He was the founder and leader of the powerful Zetas drug cartel, considered to be one of the two most powerful drug gangs in the country. It's notorious for its extreme violence and was one of the first gangs to publicly display the beheaded bodies of its rivals. Heriberto Lazcano was known as the executioner for his brutality. He was suspected of hundreds of killings.
An exclusive look into a notorious gang, an elite group comprised of ex-Mexican military members who have evolved into one of the deadliest forces working the U.S.-Mexico border. They are Los Zetas.
Their boss, the head of the Gulf Cartel,
Mexico has had some famous gangsters in its history, especially those involved in selling illegal drugs. These gangsters became well known because they were very powerful, often fought with other gangs, and broke the law in big ways. We're going to talk about 5 of these gangsters. Each one has a unique story that shows a part of Mexico's history with drug selling and gangs. Their lives were full of action, danger, and big decisions that had a huge impact on their country. Mexico has long been a significant producer of opium and marijuana. In the 1970s and 1980s, small-scale Mexican traffickers were supplanted by more organized groups as the demand for narcotics, particularly in the United States, began to soar. The first major consolidation of drug traffickers into a cartel structure was the Guadalajara Cartel, formed in the late 1970s. It was Mexico's first major drug trafficking network, controlling most of the narcotics flowing into the United States from Mexico. The 1989 arrest of Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo, the leader of the Guadalajara Cartel, led to the fragmentation of the organization into several factions. These factions became the basis for many of the cartels that would dominate Mexican drug trafficking in the years to come, such as the Sinaloa, Tijuana, and Juarez cartels. Throughout the 1990s, these cartels expanded their operations, not only in terms of geographic coverage, but also in the diversity of their criminal activities, including kidnapping, human trafficking, and extortion. In 2006, then-President Felipe Calderón launched a military-led initiative to combat drug trafficking and organized crime. This move dramatically escalated violence across the country, as cartels fought back against military and police forces as well as against each other. The crackdown led to the killing or capture of several key cartel leaders, which in turn led to further fragmentation of the cartels into smaller, often more violent groups. This period saw the rise of the Zetas, a cartel known for its particularly brutal tactics. Originally formed by defectors from the Mexican Special Forces, the capture of several high-profile cartel leaders, such as Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán of the Sinaloa Cartel, has not significantly diminished drug trafficking in Mexico. Instead, it has led to the rise of new groups and alliances, as well as a continued cycle of violence. Modern cartels have diversified their criminal portfolios to include a wider range of activities, such as illegal mining, logging, and extortion. Beyond traditional drug trafficking, the presence and actions of cartels have profound impacts on Mexican society, from displacement and human rights abuses to influencing local and national politics.
He was the founder and leader of the powerful Zetas drug cartel, considered to be one of the two most powerful drug gangs in the country. It's notorious for its extreme violence and was one of the first gangs to publicly display the beheaded bodies of its rivals. Heriberto Lazcano was known as the executioner for his brutality. He was suspected of hundreds of killings. The US had offered a $5 million reward for information leading to his arrest. Mexico had offered $2.3 million.
The Mexican Navy claims to have killed the top Los Zetas drug cartel leader Heriberto Lazcano, along with 2 other gang members, in a shootout 80 miles from the Texan border in Mexico. Lazcano, alias the Executioner, is the founder of the Notorious gang, which had been implicated in a string of mass killings and kidnappings. Lazcano's death follows long-standing rivalry with his deputy Miguel Trevino, alias Z40, which...
Photographs said to show the body of a notorious drugs gang leader are being shown on Mexican television. Heriberto Lazcano, the head of the Zetas cartel, is known as the Executioner for his extreme violence. Government leaders say he was killed in a military operation.
Heriberto Lazcano, known as El Lasca, was indeed a formidable figure in the realm of organized crime, particularly as the leader of Los Zetas, which is known for its brutal and diverse criminal activities. Under Lazcano's leadership, Los Zetas, originally formed by ex-military personnel, maintained a semblance of military structure and discipline, which set it apart from other criminal organizations in Mexico. This military-like structure facilitated Los Zetas' expansion across Mexico and the diversification of their criminal portfolio to include not just drug trafficking, but also kidnapping, human trafficking, and extortion, among others. Lazcano's leadership was characterized by a blend of respect and fear, not just among his followers, but also within the broader context of Mexican organized crime. This respect was rooted in the organization's military origins and was evident in practices such as recovering the bodies of fallen comrades, caring for their families, and breaking out arrested members from prison. These actions demonstrated a level of loyalty and camaraderie more commonly associated with military units than with criminal gangs. Following Lazcano's death, Los Zetas faced a leadership vacuum and internal strife, particularly with the rise of Miguel Trevino, known for his focus on drug trafficking and a more confrontational approach. Unlike Lazcano, Trevino lacked the military background and, consequently, the same level of respect among the rank and file of Los Zetas. This shift in leadership style and the internal conflicts it spurred, along with intense pressure from law enforcement, have led to a decentralization and fragmentation within the organization. The cohesion and centralized command structure that once characterized Los Zetas under Lazcano have given way to a more decentralized network of independent cells operating under the Los Zetas brand, but without a unified command. This transformation has implications for the future of Los Zetas and organized crime in Mexico more broadly. The lack of a strong, centralized leadership and the shift towards a decentralized network of criminal cells can lead to increased violence and instability as these cells vie for power, territory, and influence. This shift may also change the dynamics of competition and cooperation among different criminal organizations in Mexico, with potential alliances forming and dissolving as the balance of power shifts in the absence of strong leaders like Lazcano. In conclusion, Heriberto Lazcano's leadership of Los Zetas marked a significant period in the history of Mexican organized crime, characterized by military discipline, expansion, and brutality. His death has led to significant changes within Los Zetas, with long-term implications for the organization and the landscape of organized crime in Mexico. Vicente Carrillo Fuentes, also known as El Viceroy, was a significant figure in the Mexican drug trafficking scene, having inherited the leadership of the Juarez Cartel after his brother's death in 1997. At the time, the Juarez Cartel was considered the most powerful drug trafficking organization in Mexico. Carrillo Fuentes struggled to maintain control over the cartel's territory amidst conflicts with rival organizations and internal disputes. Unlike his brother, who managed to create a federative structure among different cartels, Carrillo Fuentes was unable to do so, leading to constant territorial disputes, especially with the Sinaloa Cartel. Born in Navolato, Sinaloa, Carrillo Fuentes took over the cartel with Jose Esparragoza, alias El Azul, following his brother Armando Carrillo Fuentes' death during plastic surgery. Under his leadership, the cartel was responsible for transporting tons of from Colombia through Mexico to the United States. The Juarez cartel's dominance in the drug trade was initially due to its connections with federal authorities, which offered protection. However, the environment became much more violent over time. The alliance between the Juarez and Sinaloa cartels ended in 2004, leading to a violent conflict that made Ciudad Juarez one of the most dangerous cities in the world. Carrillo Fuentes' attempts to combat the Sinaloa cartel involved strengthening the Juarez cartel's armed wing, La Linea, and collaborating with the US-based gang Barrio Azteca. Despite these efforts, the Sinaloa cartel, led by Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán, eventually overpowered the Juarez cartel. Carrillo Fuentes was captured in 2014 and sentenced to 28 years in prison. He was charged with numerous crimes, including drug trafficking, money laundering, and murder. Known for his violent methods, Carrillo Fuentes was reported to have personally killed some of his enemies and was the first to use car bombs in attacks against the police. The Juarez cartel's influence waned significantly with the deaths and arrests of the Carrillo Fuentes brothers, Those small cells continue to operate in Chihuahua and engage in conflicts with the Sinaloa Cartel. Despite a request for extradition by U.S. authorities, Carrillo Fuentes remains imprisoned in Mexico. Juan Jose Esparragoza Moreno, better known as El Azul, was a key figure in the Mexican drug trafficking world and a leading member of the Sinaloa Cartel. His nickname, El Azul, the Blue, is said to have derived from his dark complexion, which was so deep that it appeared almost blue. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Esparragoza Moreno was known for his low-profile approach to the drug trafficking business, preferring to operate in the shadows rather than seeking public attention. Esparragoza Moreno's criminal career spans several decades, during which he was involved in various facets of the drug trade, from production and transportation to distribution. He was reputed for his strategic acumen and his ability to broker peace among conflicting cartel factions, earning him a reputation as a skilled negotiator within the criminal underworld. One of the notable aspects of Esparragoza Moreno's career was his ability to maintain relationships with high-ranking officials, including governors, police chiefs, and military officers, which allowed him to operate with a significant degree of impunity. His connections extended beyond the drug world, influencing political and law enforcement spheres, which was a testament to his deep entrenchment within the corrupt elements of the state. Esparragoza Moreno was also known for his involvement in significant cartel alliances and conflicts. For instance, he played a role in the Sinaloa Cartel's efforts to control the Golden Triangle, a key drug-producing area in Mexico, and to combat rival groups such as Los Zetas. The Sinaloa Cartel's strategy involved leveraging their economic power and corrupt government connections to establish dominance over drug trafficking routes and territories. Despite his involvement in violent and illegal activities, Esparragoza Moreno was considered by some to possess a certain level of honor and respect for certain codes of conduct within the criminal world. He was known for his personal charm, sense of humor, and preference for resolving disputes without unnecessary violence, although he did not hesitate to use force when it served his interests. Esparragoza Moreno's ability to remain a significant figure in the drug trade for so long, avoiding high-profile captures and maintaining a relatively low public profile, was attributed to his cautious approach and strategic alliances. His death, rumored on several occasions, was often met with skepticism, as he had previously been reported dead only to resurface. Overall, Juan Jose Esparragoza Moreno's legacy in the world of drug trafficking is marked by his strategic mind, ability to navigate complex criminal and political landscapes, and his preference for operating behind the scenes. Enidina Arellano Felix, often referred to as La Narcomami, the Narco Mom, assumed control of the Tijuana cartel following the capture of her son, Fernando Sanchez Arellano, also known as El Ingeniero, on June 23, 2014. Enidina is the sister of the original leaders of the organization, the Arellano Felix brothers, and her ascent to leadership marked a significant change in the cartel's operations. Before taking over the cartel, Enidina and her former husband were involved in several businesses, including a chain of pharmacies and a real estate company, which were used to launder the cartel's money. Under her oversight, the Tijuana cartel transitioned from an extremely violent gang to a more business-like operation, favoring alliances with other organizations, including Colombian drug traffickers, over violence. The Tijuana cartel, also known as the Arellano Felix organization, was a dominant force in drug trafficking from Tijuana to California for nearly 2 decades, also profiting from other criminal activities like contraband and human trafficking in the region. The cartel faced significant challenges between 2002 and 2008 as its leaders were captured or killed, leading to a power vacuum and internal divisions. This resulted in a violent turf war in Tijuana, which began to subside around 2010 amid rumors that Fernando Sanchez Arellano had reached an agreement with the Sinaloa Cartel. Despite her lower profile compared to other cartel leaders, Enidina has been on the U.S. Department of Treasury's list of drug traffickers since 2002. Her leadership is characterized by a reportedly less violent approach and a focus on financial operations, which could indicate a shift in the cartel's tactics. However, if the Sinaloa Cartel indeed controls the Arellano Felix clan's operations, The change in leadership might have a minimal impact on the organization's overall activities.
An exclusive look into a notorious gang, an elite group comprised of ex-Mexican military members who have evolved into one of the deadliest forces working the U.S.-Mexico border. They are Los Zetas.
And they admit causing terror in Mexico, but they're also busy on this side of the river as well.
Soldiers of terror. They admit they are Zetas. They're part of an organized group of mercenaries terrorizing people in Mexican border towns. These assassins tell stories, the way they kidnap, torture, mutilate, and conduct hits for the drug lords. Their boss, the head of the Gulf Cartel, Osiel Carnasguillen.
Osiel Carnasguillen is a significant figure in the history of organized crime in Mexico, particularly known for his leadership of the Gulf Cartel, one of the country's most powerful drug trafficking organizations. Born in 1967 in Matamoros, Tamaulipas, Carnasguillen rose through the ranks to lead the Gulf Cartel following the arrest of its previous leaders. Under Carnasguillen's leadership, the Gulf Cartel expanded its operations, not only in drug trafficking, but also in various forms of organized crime, including extortion, kidnapping, and human trafficking. His tenure was marked by the intensification of violence and corruption in Mexico, as the cartel fought both the Mexican government and rival criminal groups to maintain and expand its control. Carnasguillen was known for his violent tactics and for maintaining a network of corruption within Mexican law enforcement and politics, which helped him evade capture for years. His notoriety increased following a 1999 incident where he directly confronted and threatened the agents and an FBI agent in Mexico, leading to his indictment by the United States. He was eventually arrested by the Mexican military in 2003 in Matamoros, Tamaulipas. His arrest was a significant victory for Mexican law enforcement and was part of a broader effort by both Mexico and the United States to combat drug trafficking and organized crime. After his arrest, Carnasguillen was extradited to the United States in 2007, where he faced multiple charges related to drug trafficking, organized crime, and money laundering. In 2010, Osiel Carnasguillen pleaded guilty to several charges in a U.S. court, including conspiracy to launder money, conspiracy to possess and distribute drugs, and conspiracy to commit assault and murder in aid of racketeering. He was subsequently sentenced to 25 years in prison and agreed to forfeit $50 million as part of his plea agreement. Carnasguillen's imprisonment marked the end of an era for the Gulf Cartel, but the organization has continued to operate, albeit with changing alliances and leadership. His legacy includes the militarization of drug cartels in Mexico, as he was instrumental in recruiting former military personnel to form the cartel's armed wing, known as Los Zetas, which later splintered off into a separate and equally notorious criminal organization. The stories of these 5 gangsters show us how the selling of illegal drugs in Mexico has changed over time. These gangsters did some pretty bold and dangerous things, which affected a lot of people's lives in Mexico. Their stories help us understand the big problems Mexico faces with drug selling and gang violence. Even today, Mexico is working hard to solve these problems. By learning about these gangsters, we can see how important it is to make good choices and how big of an effect one person can have on the world around.
Mayo on the left there and his son Vicente on the right have a narco pedigree that may be unrivaled in Chicago or anywhere else. Mayo, whose full name is Ismael Zambada Garcia, is the current top leader of the Sinaloa Cartel that controls a majority of illicit drugs sold in Chicago. He was named in a new federal indictment this week, underscored by what his son Vicente has told authorities over the years from a Chicago jail cell.
This dramatic moment was the beginning of the end for Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán. After his long run from the law, repeatedly escaping authorities, he was now caught. He had no idea where he was being taken. In this never-before-seen video obtained by ABC News, this was the moment when the notorious drug lord learned he had landed in New York. He had been brought to the U.S. to face justice. The most wanted drug lord in the world, now bleary-eyed and bewildered. And tonight, El Chapo has now been convicted on all 10 federal charges, including drug trafficking and conspiracy to murder.
The intricate tapestry of organized crime in Mexico
is woven with the stories of notorious figures whose legacies have left indelible marks on the country's history and beyond. Among these, 5 individuals stand out for their notoriety, the vast empires they built, and the profound impacts they had on the drug trade and law enforcement worldwide. From the ruthless leadership of Arturo Beltrán Leyva to the infamous escapes of Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán, these figures epitomize the complexity and danger of the Mexican drug war. Their stories are not merely tales of crime, but narratives that highlight the challenges of combating an industry that thrives in the shadows of society.
Mexican drug lord Arturo Beltrán Leyva is dead. Dubbed the boss of bosses, Leyva was one of Mexico's most wanted men. He was shot dead on Wednesday evening by Navy forces just 1 week after he escaped another army operation targeting him.
It was a state funeral for a man hailed as a national hero in Mexico's drug war, Marine Melquisedec Angula Cordova, who died in a daring raid last week that also took the life of perhaps the country's most powerful drug kingpin, Arturo Beltrán Leyva.
Arturo Beltrán Leyva, also known as El Barbas, was a significant figure in Mexico's criminal underworld. He was born in Sinaloa, a state in Mexico known for being the cradle of many notorious drug traffickers. Arturo, along with his brothers, initially worked closely with the Sinaloa Cartel, one of the most powerful drug trafficking organizations in the world. The Beltrán Leyva brothers were key players in the cartel, contributing significantly to its operations and expansion. However, in the early 2000s, the Beltrán Leyva brothers' relationship with the Sinaloa Cartel began to sour. This tension eventually led to a split, with the Beltrán Leyva brothers forming their own organization. This new group, known as the Beltrán Leyva Organization, BLO, quickly established itself as a formidable force in the world of organized crime. The BLO engaged in a wide range of criminal activities, including drug trafficking, money laundering, kidnapping, and extortion. One of the hallmarks of the Beltrán Leyva organization under Arturo's leadership was its use of extreme violence. The BLO was known for its brutal tactics, including torturing and murdering rivals, law enforcement officers, and anyone who stood in their way. This violent approach led to numerous confrontations with other criminal groups, particularly their former allies in the Sinaloa Cartel. The split between the Beltrán Leyva organization and the Sinaloa Cartel ignited a bloody war that contributed to a significant increase in violence across Mexico. Arturo Beltrán Leyva's reign came to an end in December 2009, during a dramatic shootout with Mexican Marines in Cuernavaca, a city just south of Mexico City. This operation marked one of the most significant victories for the Mexican government in its fight against drug cartels. Arturo's death led to further fragmentation within the Beltrán Leyva organization, as various factions broke off to form their own groups or align with other cartels. Despite his demise, Arturo Beltrán Leyva's legacy continues to influence the landscape of organized crime in Mexico. The violence and tactics employed by the BLO under his leadership set a precedent for other criminal groups, contributing to the ongoing challenges Mexico faces in its efforts to combat drug trafficking and organized crime. Héctor Luis Palma Salazar, better known by his nickname El Güero, which roughly translates to Blondie in English, often referring to his light hair, was a prominent figure in the Mexican drug trafficking world, particularly within the Sinaloa Cartel. His involvement in the cartel's operations played a significant role in shaping the dynamics of drug trafficking and cartel wars in Mexico. Héctor Palma Salazar began his career in drug trafficking in the 1980s. He initially worked for Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo, the leader of the Guadalajara Cartel, which was one of the earliest and most powerful Mexican drug cartels. Following the disintegration of the Guadalajara Cartel, Palma aligned himself with Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán and the Sinaloa Cartel, which emerged as a dominant force in the drug trafficking industry. Within the Sinaloa Cartel, Palma quickly rose through the ranks due to his loyalty, strategic acumen, and the successful orchestration of drug shipments, particularly
from Colombia to the United States via Mexico. His operations contributed significantly to the cartel's wealth and power, establishing him as a key player within the organization. The drug trafficking landscape in Mexico is marked by violent conflicts among competing cartels, and Palma's life was deeply affected by these battles. In the 1990s, a rift within the Sinaloa Cartel led to a violent feud with the Tijuana Cartel, led by the Arellano Felix brothers. This conflict took a devastating personal toll on Palma in 1995, when his wife and children were brutally murdered in retaliation by the Tijuana Cartel, a tragic event that underscored the ruthless nature of cartel wars in Mexico. In 1995, Palma was arrested by Mexican authorities after a plane he was traveling in crashed, and he was subsequently extradited to the United States, where he faced charges related to drug trafficking. He served a sentence in the US before being sent back to Mexico to face additional charges. His incarceration marked a significant downturn in his influence within the Sinaloa Cartel and the broader landscape of Mexican organized crime. Héctor Luis Palma Salazar's life story is emblematic of the complex interplay between drug trafficking, cartel violence, and personal tragedy. His rise and fall within the Sinaloa Cartel illustrate the volatile nature of the drug trade in Mexico and the personal risks involved in such a criminal enterprise. Despite his arrest and the setbacks faced by the Sinaloa Cartel, the organization has continued to be a major player in the drug trafficking world, adapting to changes in leadership and continuing its operations both within Mexico and internationally. Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo, often referred to as the Godfather of Mexican drug trafficking, was a seminal figure in the evolution of the drug trade in Mexico. His leadership of the Guadalajara Cartel during the 1980s marked a significant turning point in the organization and operation of drug trafficking in the country, setting the stage for the modern era of Mexican cartels. Félix Gallardo was born in Culiacán, Sinaloa, Mexico, a region that would later become synonymous with drug trafficking. Initially, he worked as a Mexican federal judicial police agent, a position that gave him critical insights into law enforcement operations and methodologies. This background, combined with his cunning and ambition, facilitated his eventual pivot into the world of drug trafficking. In the early 1980s, Félix Gallardo founded the Guadalajara Cartel, one of the first and most powerful drug trafficking organizations in Mexico. Unlike previous operations, which were more fragmented and less organized, the Guadalajara Cartel functioned with a level of coordination and strategy akin to a multinational corporation. Félix Gallardo was instrumental in forging alliances with other traffickers and in establishing the primary drug trafficking routes from Mexico to the United States. Under Félix Gallardo's leadership, the Guadalajara Cartel diversified its operations in dealing with various drugs. He was particularly innovative in establishing a network of complicit law enforcement and government officials, ensuring protection for his operations through bribery and corruption. This model of integrating cartel activities with elements of the state apparatus would become a hallmark of Mexican drug trafficking organizations. The Guadalajara Cartel's dominance was challenged by internal conflicts and external pressures, including increased law enforcement scrutiny from both Mexico and the United States. The watershed moment came with the abduction, torture, and murder of D-Agent Enrique Kiki Camarena in 1985, an act that significantly intensified U.S. efforts to combat the Mexican drug trade. Following this incident, the cartel began to fragment, and Félix Gallardo was eventually arrested in 1989. Even after his arrest, Félix Gallardo's influence persisted. From prison, he reportedly orchestrated the division of his empire among his lieutenants, leading to the formation of several cartels that still operate today, including the Sinaloa, Tijuana, and Juarez cartels. His strategies and organizational structures have had a lasting impact on the drug trafficking landscape in Mexico. Félix Gallardo's life story is a testament to the complexities of the drug trade, highlighting the interplay between crime, law enforcement, and politics. His legacy is one of innovation and infamy, having laid the groundwork for the subsequent generations of cartels that continue to affect Mexico and the broader international community.
76-year-old Ismael Zambada, who goes by El Mayo, has assumed the Sinaloa throne and acts as overlord of the cartel that has dominated drug sales in Chicago for years, controlling 80% of cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and fentanyl sales here. El Mayo, under indictment in Chicago for 15 years, a career fugitive with a $15 million U.S. bounty on his head, is now facing this new U.S. indictment in New York.
Ismael El Mayo's Zambada is a notoriously elusive figure in the world of organized crime and a key leader within the Sinaloa Cartel, one of the most powerful and pervasive drug trafficking organizations in Mexico. With a career in the narcotics trade that spans several decades, Zambada has managed to avoid capture, making him one of the most enduring figures in the drug war. Ismael Zambada was born in El Alamo, Sinaloa, Mexico, a state known for being a hotbed of drug trafficking activity. He began his career in the drug trade in the 1970s, initially involving himself in the trafficking of various drugs. Over the years, Zambada's operations expanded to include a wide range of narcotics, with a vast network that extended across the Americas and into Europe and Asia. Zambada's strategic acumen and deep connections within the narcotics trade have made him an invaluable asset to the Sinaloa Cartel. Often described as a key architect of the cartel's operations, he has been involved in planning and executing some of the cartel's most significant trafficking routes and strategies. His ability to navigate the complex landscape of Mexican organized crime, coupled with his low-profile approach to leadership, has allowed him to maintain a significant degree of influence within the cartel. One of the most remarkable aspects of Zambada's career is his ability to remain at large, despite extensive efforts by both Mexican and U.S. authorities to apprehend him. He has attributed his longevity in the trade to his cautious approach, avoiding the ostentatious displays of wealth and power that have led to the downfall of many of his contemporaries. His elusiveness has contributed to a somewhat mythical status, with some speculating about the extent of his connections within law enforcement and government. Zambada's family has also been involved in the cartel's operations, with several of his children and relatives holding positions within the organization. This has, at times, made his family a target for law enforcement and rival cartels alike. The dynamics of the Zambada family within the Sinaloa Cartel highlight the often familial nature of drug trafficking organizations in Mexico. Ismael El Mayo's Zambada's impact on the drug trafficking landscape in Mexico and beyond is significant. Under his guidance, the Sinaloa Cartel has continued to be a dominant force in the narcotics trade, despite the capture of other high-profile leaders like Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán. Zambada's continued freedom and operational success make him a figure of ongoing interest and concern for authorities, and a subject of intrigue in discussions about the future of the Sinaloa Cartel and the drug trade in Mexico.
This is the moment Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán makes the Mexican government look ridiculous. Pacing up and down in his cell, calmly, waiting. These are the last images of Guzmán before he makes the most daring escape in recent history.
On this quiet residential street in the Sinaloa state capital of Culiacán, with a school just across the street, is one of 5 Chapo Guzmán safe houses. Beneath this bathtub, a secret tunnel. So if you climb down the steps, you find yourself in the tunnel itself, and you can see it's been quite carefully constructed out of wood. You have to crouch a little bit, but you're quite mobile, and there's an electricity system running throughout it. The nearest other safe house from here is 3 kilometers in this direction. The constructed part of the tunnel ends here, and if you go through this door, you find yourself in the sewage system of Culiacán, an ideal escape route. And the tunnel system comes out right here in another safe house just down the road.
Everyone was silent when El Chapo decided to give those statements. Essentially, for 15 minutes, he began by thanking his wife, his 2 children, his attorneys, his paralegals. But then he went into saying that he had to bear torture for the last 30 months. He said that he was denied sanitary water, fresh water, sunlight, things that were making his head, his ears, his throat hurt. He said, I have not been able to see my wife, visit my wife, hug my children. He said this was the most inhumane conditions I've ever experienced.
Rob, this is an uphill battle for El Chapo, but the man nicknamed Shorty tonight is in a do-or-die situation. The convicted Sinaloa Cartel boss, who was responsible for 80% of Chicago's illegal drug trade, trying to do something that would convince a court he was wronged by U.S. prosecutors or die in prison on a life sentence for racketeering conspiracy. In this English translation filed today and obtained by the I-Team, Chapo says prison authorities are preventing him from receiving attorney documents for new court motions. They always use the excuse that it's because Guzmán fled from a Mexican prison, he writes. This is a ridiculous claim used to justify the anomalies. He didn't just flee from one Mexican prison. In 2015, El Chapo escaped via this jailhouse trapdoor through an underground tunnel on a motorcycle and out the other end. And in 2001, he also escaped from a different Mexican prison. Months after the most recent escape, Chapo was recaptured following a shootout with Mexican commandos who'd hunted him down, and he was brought to the U.S., where a federal jury in New York convicted him. Tonight, housed at America's most secure prison and still under indictment in Chicago, Chapo claims he is being mistreated because of escape fears.
Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán is one of the most infamous names associated with the global drug trade. His nickname, El Chapo, meaning shorty, refers to his relatively short stature, but his impact on the world of organized crime has been anything but small. As the leader of the Sinaloa Cartel, Guzmán oversaw one of the most extensive and powerful drug trafficking operations in history. El Chapo was born on April 4, 1957, in La Tuna, a small community in the state of Sinaloa, Mexico, which is often considered the epicenter of Mexican drug trafficking. Guzmán's foray into the drug trade began at a young age, initially working for the Guadalajara Cartel, before rising through the ranks due to his ruthless efficiency and strategic acumen. Under El Chapo's leadership, the Sinaloa Cartel reached unprecedented heights. The cartel's operations extended across the globe, with drug trafficking routes spanning from South America to Europe and Asia. The Sinaloa Cartel's success was partly due to Guzmán's innovative smuggling techniques, including the use of tunnels under the Mexico-US border, submarines, and other sophisticated methods to transport narcotics. El Chapo became known not just for his leadership of the border, submarines, and other sophisticated methods to transport narcotics cartel, but also for his dramatic escapes from maximum security prisons in Mexico. His first escape in 2001 involved hiding in a laundry cart, and after being recaptured in 2014, he famously escaped again in 2015 through a tunnel that led directly into his cell's shower area. These escapes turned Guzmán into a figure of almost mythic proportions and led to extensive manhunts. El Chapo's luck ran out when he was recaptured in 2016. His arrest was the result of extensive cooperation between Mexican and international law enforcement agencies. In 2017, he was extradited to the United States, where he faced numerous charges related to his leadership of the Sinaloa Cartel, including drug trafficking, money laundering, and involvement in organized crime. In 2019, after a high-profile trial in New York City that included dramatic testimonies from former cartel associates, Guzmán was found guilty on all counts. He was subsequently sentenced to life in prison, plus 30 years, and is currently serving his sentence in a high-security federal prison in the United States. El Chapo's legacy is complex, embodying the vast reach and destructive impact of global drug trafficking. While his criminal empire brought him immense wealth and power, it also caused untold suffering through violence, addiction, and corruption. His life story has been the subject of numerous books, documentaries, and TV series, reflecting the public's enduring fascination with his rise and fall. Despite his imprisonment, the Sinaloa Cartel remains active, illustrating the challenges of dismantling such deeply entrenched criminal networks. The sagas of these 5 Mexican gangsters underscore a larger narrative about the global impact of drug trafficking and the ongoing battle between law enforcement and organized crime. The lives of Arturo Beltrán Leyva, Héctor Luis Palma Salazar, Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo, Ismael El Mayo Zambada, and Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán are intertwined with the history of drug trafficking in Mexico and its repercussions around the world. Their stories reveal the complexities of loyalty, power, and betrayal within the cartels, as well as the immense challenges faced by those seeking to dismantle these criminal networks. As the fight against drug trafficking continues, the tales of these individuals serve as stark reminders of the resilience and adaptability of organized crime, and the ongoing need for innovative strategies to combat its reach.